Let's begin with our top story. The U.S. has imposed sanctions on Turkey over its Operation Peace Spring in northeast Syria. President Donald Trump has also asked Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan for an immediate ceasefire in Syria. The Treasury Department announced curbs on 2 Turkish ministries and 3 senior government officials. Washington imposed sanctions on Turkey's Ministry of National Defense and Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources. Turkey's National Defense Minister Hulusi Akar, Energy Minister Fatih Dönmez, and Interior Minister Süleyman Soylu have been targeted. Meanwhile, Syrian government troops have moved into the battle zone, setting up a potential clash with Turkish-led forces. Damascus has deployed troops near the Turkish border after Kurdish forces struck a deal with the Syrian government on Monday. Meanwhile, the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has said Ankara will not back down from its offensive in northeastern Syria. Speaking at a meeting of the Turkic Council in Baku, Erdogan said the battle will continue until victory is achieved. He also sought international funds for Ankara's safe zone plans in northeast Syria. Turkey has urged NATO allies to support its military operations in northern Syria. Meanwhile, the NATO chief, Jens Stoltenberg, said the military alliance should not lose its unity in the fight against ISIS. Speaking at a conference in London, Stoltenberg said Ankara has legitimate security concerns. He said no other ally has suffered more terrorist attacks than Turkey.
Turkey has legitimate security concerns. No other ally has suffered more terrorist attacks. No other ally is more exposed to the instability, violence and turmoil from the Middle East. And no other ally hosts so many refugees from Syria. Nevertheless, I expect Turkey to act with restraint and in coordination with other allies so that we can preserve the gains we have made against our common enemy, Daesh. An imminent concern is that captured terrorists must not be allowed to escape. The international community must find a coordinated and sustainable solution to deal with foreign fighters held in Syria.
Well, Pakistan's President Arif Alvi and Prime Minister Imran Khan are to meet the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. Duke William and Duchess of Cambridge Kate Middleton are on a 5-day visit to Pakistan. This is the first visit by Britain's royal family to Pakistan in 13 years. The royal couple will also participate in a charity event in Islamabad. They will travel then to the northern Chitral region on October 16th and Lahore on October 17th. The British High Commissioner Thomas Drew says the visit highlights historical ties between Britain and Pakistan. A statement by Kensington Palace says it will showcase Pakistan as a dynamic and forward-looking nation. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan is heading to Saudi Arabia as part of his initiative to promote peace and security in the Gulf region. Khan will meet Saudi King Salman bin Abdulaziz and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Earlier, Prime Minister Khan visited Iran, where President Rouhani hailed his efforts for peace. Iran's president said an end to the Yemen war is a prerequisite to regional peace. Leading U.S. newspaper Washington Post has slammed India's annexation and repression in occupied Kashmir as undemocratic. In its editorial, the newspaper criticized the arrest of thousands of Kashmiris amid the valley's lockdown and communications blackout. It said Indian occupation forces have tortured and beaten Kashmiris, including children as young as 13. The publication said India prides itself on being the world's largest democracy, but its actions in occupied Kashmir falsify that claim. It also said India's judiciary, including the Supreme Court, have stalled appeals challenging the revocation of Article 370. The newspaper wrote Indian officials have refused to give straight answers about when the repression will end. Saudi Arabia and Russia have signed a key deal to bolster cooperation among OPEC's member and non-member countries. The agreement was signed during Russia's President Vladimir Putin's visit to the kingdom to defuse tensions in the Gulf. The two leaders inked 20 multi-million-dollar investment contracts at the Saudi-Russian Energy Partnership meeting. Saudi Arabia's Prince Abdulaziz said the two leaders also agreed to enhance military cooperation. He said the contracts cover petroleum, space, and satellite navigation, and various other fields ranging from energy to tourism. Prince Abdulaziz said the two countries have begun a new phase of cooperation. Putin said Russia attaches great importance to the development of friendly ties with Saudi Arabia. President Hassan Rouhani says Iran will continue to scale back commitments to the 2015 nuclear deal. Speaking on state television, he said Europe should fulfill its promises under the agreement. Rouhani said U.S. sanctions have failed to hurt Iran's economy. He added Iran will start working on more advanced uranium enrichment centrifuges. The U.S. withdrew from the 2015 Iran nuclear deal last year. On to Libya, where an airstrike in Tripoli has killed 3 children. The health ministry said the 3 victims were sisters. Libya's government has blamed the forces of rival commander Khalifa Haftar for that strike. A woman and another child were injured in the airstrike. Haftar's forces have denied carrying out the strike on a house in the Fornaj district in southern Tripoli. Conflict between the government and Haftar's forces has killed and wounded hundreds of civilians. Over 120,000 people have been displaced. Libya has been in turmoil since the rule of Muammar Gaddafi was brought to an end in an uprising in 2011. On to Mexico, where gunmen have killed 14 police officials in the western Michoacan state. The Public Security Ministry said 3 others were injured in that attack. The ministry said it will use all means to arrest the attackers. Michoacan has for years faced violence by drug cartels and criminal gangs. President Andrés Obrador is struggling to control violent crime since he took office last December. EU ministers are meeting today in Luxembourg to receive an update on Brexit talks from the bloc's chief negotiator, Michel Barnier. Discussions between the EU and UK officials aimed at reaching a Brexit deal have intensified as the October 31st deadline approaches. EU leaders are pushing for an agreement before a major summit on Thursday, which might force Prime Minister Johnson to ask for a delay. Meanwhile, Finland's Prime Minister Antti Rinne has said there is not enough time for a deal. Responding, the UK House Secretary Robert Jenrick rejected the remarks, saying negotiators are working overtime to reach an agreement. Extinction Rebellions climate activists continue to hold protests in London. Staging a demonstration in the heart of that city, the activists called on the UK government to take climate action. Several key roads have been blocked, bringing traffic to a standstill. At least 12 activists were arrested after lying on the street and gluing their hands together. Members began gathering outside the Bank of England in the early hours of Monday. Protesters said major changes were needed in the current economic system to avert a climate crisis.
We are here to raise awareness about this and to make a plea that, these investors, they need to change, because otherwise they will become they will no longer be suitable in this particular situation. Business as usual cannot function anymore.
Russia claims the UK is torturing WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange during pre-trial detention. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said the sanctity of one-on-one contacts in diplomacy is very important. Lavrov said Washington's recent publication of a confidential transcript of a phone call with Ukraine sets a precedent for Julian Assange's release. He said charges against the former NSA contractor Edward Snowden should also be dropped. Lavrov said Trump's impeachment inquiry proceedings have raised many questions regarding the protection of state-to-state communication. Time now for a short break. I'll be back, though, after that with plenty more news. Stay tuned. Let's begin this segment of the Bulletin in Poland, where the ruling Law and Justice Party has secured a narrow majority in the lower house of parliament. The ruling party secured 235 seats in the 460-seat lower house. Official results say it won more than 45% of the votes. The centrist Civic Coalition secured 26% of the votes. In Spain, meanwhile, 75 people have been injured as thousands of Catalan separatists have clashed with police during demonstrations in Barcelona. The protests erupted after Spain's Supreme Court sentenced 9 of their leaders to heavy jail terms over their failed 27 independence bid. Soon after the news of the sentences were announced, Catalan demonstrators flooded the streets of Barcelona. They marched towards the airport and blocked highways and railway lines across the region. Riot police fired rubber bullets and baton charged the protesters. Over 100 flights were cancelled and several others were delayed as activists clashed with police. Demonstrators have called for a general strike on Friday, including a mass march towards Barcelona. 4 demonstrators have been killed in clashes with security forces in the Guinean capital, Conakry. Authorities say a policeman was also killed in the protests opposing a constitutional amendment. The amendment enabled President Alpha Condé to run for a 3rd term in office. Demonstrators set up barricades, burnt tires, and threw stones at police. Hundreds of police and gendarmes responded with tear gas and stun grenades. Police used live ammunition on protesters after failing to contain the situation. Interior Minister Borima Condé says several people have been arrested and security forces are in control of the situation. The death toll from Typhoon Hagibis, the most powerful storm to hit Japan in decades, has climbed to 70. Authorities said over 200 people have been injured and 15 others are still missing. Over 100,000 rescue workers, including 31,000 military troops, are searching for missing people. In a statement, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said he will put every resource to save lives. Torrential rains, high-speed winds, and overflowing rivers left almost 500,000 homes without power. The disaster has left tens of thousands of people in shelters. The UN says a third of the world's nearly 700 million children under the age of 5 are malnourished or overweight. In its first State of the World's Children report since 1999, UNICEF said children face lifelong health problems as a consequence. UNICEF's executive director, Henrietta Fore, said if children eat poorly, they live poorly as well. The report said malnutrition's cost to the global economy is estimated at $3.5 trillion every year. It said 149 million children aged 4 or younger today face stunted development. Meanwhile, 2 billion people are eating too much of the wrong foods, driving epidemics of obesity, heart disease, and diabetes. In child obesity, the U.S. tops the list with 41.86%. Margaret Atwood and Bernardine Evaristo have become the first authors to jointly win the Booker Prize for Fiction since 1992. Atwood's The Testaments and Evaristo's novel Girl, Woman, Other earned each author an equal share of the £50,000 prize.
The judges of this year's Booker Prize have explicitly flouted the rules of the literary award. They chose the first joint winners in almost 30 years.
The two victors, if you like, congratulating.
The 2 winners of the 2019 Booker Prize for Fiction are Margaret Atwood for The Testaments and Bernardine Evaristo for Girl, Woman, Other.
At 79, Atwood is the oldest ever Booker winner.
We've both got curly hair. It's because of that. Yeah. So I'm very surprised. I would have thought that I would have been too elderly.
Meanwhile, Evaristo's win makes her the first black woman to win the Booker since it began in 1969, and the first black British author.
This is incredible. It is so incredible to share this with Margaret Atwood, who is such a legend and so generous. Thank you so much. Yeah, this is incredible. I suppose a lot of people say this. I never thought it would happen to me, and I will say that I am the first black woman to win this prize.
The other nominees were Lucy Ellman, Chigozie Obioma, and Elif Shafak.
Let's move on now to West Africa, where a small Nigerian town, Igbo-Ora, is holding a twins festival for the second time in its history. Twins from Igbo-Ora and elsewhere have gathered to celebrate their existence. More in this report.
Seeing 100 sets of identical twins from all ages, dressed alike, dancing and celebrating together is a treat to one's eyes. Twins in Nigeria have their own festival in town called country's twins capital. More twins are born here than anywhere else on earth, but nobody is quite sure why. Here you can find only a few households which do not have at least one set of twins.
We are not more than one, we are not more than two, we are not more than three, we are countless. So it's great seeing a lot of twins, especially when wearing the same thing. You see people wearing the same thing, so it's a great thing to be here then.
Whilst twins could be considered the result of providence, other local people attribute the predominance of twins to tradition. According to one popular belief, this is due to the diet of the women here. They take a particular plant dish, ilasa, made from yam and gombola leaf soup.
This kind of festival is very, very unique because this town has the highest number of twin births.
In the predominantly rural community of Igbo-Ora, twins are a blessing, with many pregnant women wishing for multiple births.
The U.S. says it will impose new tariffs on over $150 billion worth of Chinese goods if a trade deal is not finalized by December 15th. In an interview, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said major issues, including industrial subsidies and cyber theft, are still unresolved. Mnuchin said he still hopes a tentative deal agreed last week to suspend fresh tariffs will be formally approved. The Treasury Secretary said more trade negotiations at various levels would take place over the coming weeks. But Mnuchin's tariff warning seemed in contrast with U.S. President Donald Trump's optimism last week. Describing the talks as a love fest, Trump said the preliminary deal would take about 5 weeks to complete. He added that he might sign the deal alongside China's President Xi Jinping at a United Nations summit in Chile in December. Well, Asian stock markets are trading cautiously as skepticism over the partial U.S.-China trade deal grew after Washington's threats of tariffs. Chinese mainland markets have dropped in early trade, with the Shanghai Composite and the Shenzhen component fell 0.5%. The indices of Hong Kong's Hang Seng have traded near flat. South Korea's Kospi Index and Japan's Nikkei 225 have jumped, but Australia's ASX 200 wavered between fractional gains and losses. Time now to find out what the weather is like around the world. And with that, you're all caught up. Thank you for watching this bulletin here at Indus News.